topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Camping Show. I'm CW Getz. It is Wednesday, October 20th, 2021. We have a beautiful 70-degree, it says cloudy, but it is not cloudy. It is beautiful sunshiny out. Sunshiny, it's my new word. Yeah, beautiful weather here today. Just a nice, gentle breeze. Couldn't ask for anything better. My guest will tell you that the rivers are dried up, and he'll explain that. But yeah, we've got that still going on. Let's seriously, it's very, very dry here. Tonight's episode is brought to you by Campground Views, making camping easier, and by Rutabaga Paddle Sports, providing time on the water. Tonight's episode is gear maintenance and storage with my special guest, Cliff Jacobson. Cliff Jacobson is one of North America's most respected outdoors writers and wilderness paddlers. He's a retired environmental science teacher, an outdoor skills instructor, a canoeing and camping consultant, and the author of more than a dozen top-selling books and a popular video on canoeing and camping. Cliff is a distinguished Eagle Scout, a recipient of the American Canoe Association's prestigious Legends of Paddling Award, and a member of the ACA Hall of Fame. Well, with that, welcome to the show, Cliff.
Hey, listen, thanks for having me back, man. I'm glad I'm doing this show with you today because I am sad today because we had planned this canoe trip on the upper Rio Grande River for a long, long time in our solo canoes, kind of a bunch of the same guys. And we had to cancel it yesterday because for the first time ever, and I mean, I've done this river like 4 times. My friend Larry Rice has done it about 20 times, the same time of year. We've never had water this slow. Yeah. It was running 15 cubic feet per second.
As compared to what's normal?
Oh, usually it'll be 300, 400, 500, 600, at least 150. I mean, we could do it at 125. We could probably even do it at 50 or 60. We'd have to walk a little bit. But
right.
15, it's bizarre.
15.
I'm sad.
That's
so.
Yeah. That's pathetic.
What it is. I know.
Pathetic.
Well, at least we can think. At least we can think about this canoeing and camping and outdoor stuff, and hope things get better. And good afternoon to you, Don Kelly, wherever you are. He just flashed on the screen.
Yeah, let's see here. There he is.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for joining us. Yeah, you guys chime in if you want. We'll pop in there and recognize everybody here. We'll try to anyway. So yeah, you win this. You win some, you lose some. I didn't get to paddle as much this year either, and of course that was a huge reason. Cliff, we'll start with this. What's the number one piece of equipment that gets neglected with regard to maintenance?
I think that one's pretty easy. Can you throw number one and bring up photos number one? Okay, well. And that's edge tools. So let's start with that. My question is, the last time you were camping and you had to borrow somebody's knife to cut the food for dinner, or use a hatchet or an axe or a saw to cut something, when was the last time you had a sharp one? And I would submit that for most people, it's probably been a very long time because people just don't maintain edge tools. People have this feeling that, oh, you can get some special piece of steel or something magical and you will never have to sharpen it again. Hardly. There's no such thing as an edge tool that doesn't need sharpening. You cut something with it, it's going to get dull. So that's neglected because people don't know how to sharpen. And to that, they don't take care of it either. They seldom, if ever, hardly ever oil their knives or axes. Yeah, I know most knives today are stainless steel, but still they will deteriorate if you don't keep them clean, put some oil on them once in a while. Um, and axes are carbon steel. They're going to rust in a flash. So that's the first thing. And if you throw number 2 on there, throw slide 2 on there. And the second big thing is the sheaths. I just want to say a few words about this. People don't maintain sheaths at all. Yeah, I realize these are leather sheaths. Most people today don't have leather. They have plastic sheaths that the knives snap in. Those are pretty good because the knives won't come out. They also have like kind of cloth sheaths that have Velcro on them to keep them closed. Big mistake, because sometimes that Velcro can freeze. Sometimes it can get wet. It can get caught going through when you're going through the bushes or whatever. It can open up and you wind up losing the knife. So sheaths, I think, are a real important thing for your edge tools. And they're easy to make, like the ones that you just saw before. Or if you throw number 3 on, slide 3 up there, if you can. These are sheaths you want to make yourself. They're very simple. There are plans in my book, Camping Stock Secrets, how to make it. And you can make one of these sheaths. If you want to do it quick and dirty, like the one on the top, that's a 30-minute procedure. 30 minutes for the one on the top. The ones below, it's probably more like an hour to an hour and a half because you're sewing the thing and so forth. Very, very simple. But once you make a heavy-duty sheath like this, you will be a happy camper because nobody is ever going to get cut and that blade will be protected. So, I would say those are really the big ones. There's some other things that we could add to this. One is people come home with their packs. A lot of people just throw them in a bin. Not the best idea, especially if there's any cotton in there, canvas packs. They throw them in a bin and then they just start deteriorating. And even nylon packs are going to have problems because if you've ever owned a tent that one day you look and the inner floor is peeling. You ever own it? Or a tarp? It's peeling. You know what that peeling is? That's microorganisms that are attacking the polyurethane coating. And if you store it damp, you're going to have problems because that dampness is going to cause those microorganisms to increase and you're going to smell it and you're going to just basically destroy the item, So, I think those are the big ones. We'll talk about sleeping bag maintenance later, but the problem with sleeping bags is really exactly the opposite. People over-maintain them and kill them.
Right. Yeah, we talked about that one time before. So let me ask you this. When it comes to saw blades, you don't sharpen your saw blades, do you?
No, of course.
Okay.
I guess some people can.
Yeah, you can, but I didn't know if you went to that extent or not. I don't know if anybody else does either. Yeah.
That's too much work. But they'll last
yeah,
a long time. I mean, on a typical camping trip, those saw blades will actually last for several seasons if you keep them from rusting. And in order to do that, I just bring along a little spray oil. And once in a while, zip, I spray them with oil, and that's the end of that. But that's what I do.
And as long as the down stuff doesn't have rocks embedded in them.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about this? Are there some pieces of equipment that require more frequent maintenance than others? And I know the knives.
Yeah, well, yes, there are. Okay, the one that actually comes to mind, throw slide 5 up there if you have it. Okay. Bolts on canoes. I would say to anybody who owns a canoe, when was the last time you tightened the bolts? Because what happens is this bar if this is the center bar, the yoke bar, that's what you're carrying the boat on. And that thing twists back and forth as you carry it. And a lot of canoes only have one bolt in the center. Now, I don't know why some manufacturers do that. Maybe it's to save a nickel a bolt. I don't know. But you really want double bolts so that you don't get that twisting, because what happens is they break, and they always break in the same place right along that bolt. And the other thing, canoes, and I would say any boat that we're talking about, sort of moves with the water. It twists and turns. It goes up waves and down waves. And if it's got any bolts in it, they just loosen up over time. And so the first thing I do, literally every spring when I take my canoes out, I start by tightening up the bolts. Now, you don't have to do overkill. Tighten them once at the beginning of the season. And you know what? By fall, check out, you're going to find they're loose again. And especially just riding on top of a car where they're vibrating like this, and that stuff vibrates loose. So
yeah,
I would say that's a biggie. If you want to still talk about anything having to do with canoes, if you have the old-fashioned cane seats, the hand cane seats, those things really take a beating. They have to be maintained, and that means you really need to oil that oil the woodwork, and you need to revarnish the cane. Not necessarily every season, but every few seasons or so. And I guess I could add a couple other things to this. One is stoves. I think I had, throw number 4 on there. Let's talk about stoves for a second. Now, first of all, most people today are not using gasoline stoves anymore. They're using butane stoves like you see over here. With a butane stove, basically you really don't have to do a thing. You just turn it off and you're done for the year. Gasoline stoves are a different matter. You can't leave, well, I guess you can, but it's not wise to leave gasoline in a container like you see here. It just oxidizes, and it causes all kinds of problems with the stove missing. So if you are using a gasoline stove, again, not many people are, but before you put that baby to bed for the winter, run it dry, and the last tank you run, throw a little bit of old-fashioned carburetor cleaner in there or something to that effect to clean out the goobers, and run the thing dry, and your gas stove will function for years and years and years. And if you store gasoline over the winter, I think everybody knows you want to have that container full pretty much close to the top, so you don't get an air interface that causes the deterioration of the fuel.
Yeah. And the carb cleaner is a great idea. I mean, it really is. That stuff works too. Because there are what I'm going to call it, impurities in that stuff, and that does gum up things. And when you burn it, that of course does even more. There's one thing I wanted to mention to you, Clip. Was it photo number 3? I think you had up there was the canoe with the carry thwart.
That was 5. Right, yeah, number 5.
Oh, 5. Okay, there you go. That's the one. Okay, you see where the two two pieces of gunnel sandwich the core. Okay. I've had and I'm not going to say what brand it is, but I had screws that they go through and they attach through the actual boat itself, and then it'll attach to the other side, the outside piece of that gunnel. And I actually had screws that were loose. All that goes all the way around the boat. The screws that were loose, and some screws actually were stripped. So that's something that I realized that, hey, I guess I need to check these too in the spring before I take the boat out.
Yeah, they will. All the interior screws, I should have mentioned that. You're absolutely right. That has to be tightened too. And just a word of note, if anybody has these, quote, old-fashioned Royalex canoes with wood trim, and they tell you to release the rails, literally unscrew the rails near the front, you know what? There's an easier solution to that. You really don't have to do that. What you want to do is, you only have to do this once. Release the rails, okay, back about 2 feet from each end. and then slot the screw holes, slot them parallel to the gunnels, and then you can screw the rails back on. What happens then is that when the Royal X freezes or the wood freezes, the wood and the Royal X move at different rates. It's an expansion and contraction, and it goes like this. And if you have slotted the rails, there's room for that rail to move without breaking when it would have in a round hole. In a round hole, if it moves, it's going to break it out. But if it's in a slot, it's going to move back and forth like this. Doesn't need to be a very big slot. A third of an inch maybe is plenty. And that's it. That's really all you have to do. That's what I've done with mine for years, and I haven't had problems.
That's interesting. Because I was the guy, and I actually do this, loosen the screws, every winter, and I do that probably about, probably a 2 feet, maybe even a little bit more in from each edge. Yeah. Now, how do you slot, or how did you slot your gunnel rail?
Well, you only need to slot the Royal X.
Right. But how did you? You slotted the Royal X.
Just slotting the Royal X so that screw can move back and forth, because the rails are not what cracks. It's the Royal X that cracks. I'm pretty primitive when it comes to doing tools. The only thing I can make, I'm not kidding, I can build nice canoes. Why? I don't know, but I can't do anything else. So most people would use a router. I don't have a router, so I just use a drill bit and go,
really? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought maybe you were going to tell me
router is certainly the
like a round file or something. If you took a file.
Well, I suppose it was going to take a while, but a router would just be zip.
That's what I thought you were going to say. Yeah. Well, that's true. But you know what? Router would be a little hard to, I don't know. That would be a little tricky too. I mean, maybe a die grinder or something like that.
Yeah, because Royal X is pretty soft. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So that was, I wanted to go back and say, with regard to, this is something, we're going to shift gears a little bit here. With regard to field repairs, things that you have to do while you're on a trip. Get this paper up here, I can read it. What items would you recommend carrying in your little toolkit on a canoe trip for field repairs?
Well, I would say that depends on where you're going. Okay, my minimal kit would consist of this: one, a multi-tool, and I like the Leatherman original multi-tool. With that, you can do a lot of things. Quick curing epoxy. We had a case on the Noatak River in Alaska where a seat broke, and a wooden frame seat on a canoe broke, and the only way we could fix it was with epoxy and a couple of clamps. If we didn't have clamps, we would have duct taped it together till it hardened, whatever. But we really needed the quick curing epoxy. And if you're going in harm's way, you might want to take maybe a 6-inch square or a couple 6-inch squares of fiberglass, because if you really damage a boat really badly, you might need the fiberglass. But I've only used that one time in all my years of paddling. But instant quick epoxy, I've used a lot.
Okay, let's go back. When you say a quick epoxy, give us a brand name or something like that.
I don't know. Whatever you get in a hardware store, that hardware store, quick curing epoxy. Basically, you want stuff that's going to be pretty hard in 10 minutes.
Okay, so like a 2-part epoxy.
Yeah,
like a two-part thing.
Exactly right. Light wire. This is another thing I've only used one time. We had a seat completely blow out. It was basically not repairable, and we had to actually use light wire to fix it. Again, that's only happened once in a lifetime. So if you want to omit the wire, omit the wire. Gorilla tape. Yes, Gorilla tape is better than normal duct tape. I don't know how many listeners are familiar with tear aid patches. Tear aid, TEAR-AID. These are remarkable. They come in two kinds. There's A and B. The B type work only on vinyl. The A type work on everything else. Now, just to show you how amazing these patches are, okay, this was a few years ago. We did a canoe trip on the Blood Vein River in Manitoba, and it was the only time I have ever literally put a through tear in a Royal X canoe,
Oh, wow.
and it was leaking. So I
Wow.
put ashore, and I go looking for my duct tape. I'd forgotten my duct tape. Actually, I hadn't forgotten. I just put it somewhere and couldn't remember
Couldn't
where it
find it.
was. And I didn't remember till I got home. So then
Oh,
I
wow.
got to thinking, what am I going to seal this thing? What am I going
Right.
to? And then I said, aha, I have some Terrate patches. I have A and B. B sticks to vinyl, and the outside of Royal X canoes are vinyl. So dried that baby off real good, okay, and got it good and dry. And I stuck 2 vinyl patches on there, one on top of the other.
Oh, wow.
It
Okay.
held the
Yeah.
entire trip. It never let go. And when I got home, in order to patch this thing, I tried to get the patches off. I couldn't get them off.
I was just
They
going to
would
ask
not
you.
come off. I had to grind them off in order
Oh,
to do
gosh.
in order to do a real repair. So
Wow.
these Terrate patches, I'm telling you, these are amazing, and they are really, really, really worth it. I'm going to
And
add a few other things to that
spell that,
list.
Cliff,
Yeah,
spell that patch, the name of that patch again.
Terrate, TEAR hyphen AID.
And where do folks find that at?
I think you go online, type in Terrate patches, they're going to be all over the internet.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah, yeah,
Great.
yeah. So I'm going to add a few other things on my list. One is dental floss. Yeah, you can use it for cleaning your teeth, but if you have to reattach a strap to a pack or something like that, it is tough stuff. Okay, so
Yes, it is.
bring some dental floss, and then you also want to bring at least one sort of I don't know if you call it a sailmaker's needle, but it's a big, heavy-duty needle that'll punch through relatively thin leather,
Mhm.
so that you can sew with this thing. So now you pretty much got your sewing under control. And if you wanted to add anything else, you could add another little fine needle or two with a little bit of black thread, just if you had to sew something.
Yeah.
Um,
Like
and
even a tent or something like that, a hole or
Sure.
something. Yeah.
And another thing I found actually pretty useful over time on a number of trips has been baby diaper pins. Baby
Oh,
diaper pins. I've used that when you're closing the door on a tent or whatever, and zingo, that little
yeah.
zipper
Zipper.
flap,
Yeah.
whatever you call it,
Yeah.
pops
Yeah.
off. You can run a little needle through that, or if you tear out your bug net in a tent, you can use
Get it
a
together.
few of those diaper pins to hold it back together. And it also makes a great clothesline. If you hang up a piece of parachute cord between 2 trees, take
Mhm.
a few diaper pins, pin right through the cord, okay? And then you can attach to the pin anything you want to add. And because the diaper pins are through the cord, they won't move back and forth. So I found
Oh,
diaper pins been pretty useful. They're hard to
yeah.
find now. Most stores don't have them, but you can get them on the web. You can get everything on the web.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, it was a lot
yeah.
of disposable stuff and
Hmm.
replaced all that.
Right, right.
Um, now that I'm gonna go backwards. That hook, that needle that you talked about, those are the ones that are kind of a half moon shape. Am I right? They're kind of a curved needle. Is that
Uh,
the ones?
no, these are straight needles. You can get them from a
Oh,
Tandy Leather Company, any leather
okay.
company that sells leather products. They're just heavy duty,
Yeah.
because if you have to sew a pack, you can't take one of these little
No.
things,
No.
lingerie needles, and go through those pack straps, because,
I have a needle like you're talking about, but it's a curved one. And it's very
well,
heavy
yeah,
duty, big
yeah,
eye in it.
that might work. That might work too, but
Yeah.
you basically need some power. And the first thing that fails on packs, well, zippers go
Yeah.
first. Where the pack strap attaches to the yoke,
Mhm.
or down below at the bottom attachment, that goes next. So, sometimes you can sew or repair, and sometimes you can't, but you can't if you don't have the right stuff.
Yeah, that's a fact. Cliff, on your video, Forgotten Skills, you demonstrate using a piece of paper, which I thought was very cool. Using a piece of paper, what a properly sharpened knife and a properly sharpened axe should be able to do. In which of your books do you explain how to properly sharpen each of those?
Well, that's in Camping's Top Secrets. But
Right.
if you would throw number 6 on, throw photo number 6 on. Okay. Let's just say a word about knives. A razor sharp knife is a pleasure to use. And, I don't want to get into this whole thing on knives, but a good camp knife will be able to slice a tomato wafer thin as a potato chip. If
Wow.
your knife won't do that, I think you probably have the wrong one for camping. But sharpening it is an art. And it's not something that is learned instantly, which is why people buy all these gimmicks. But if you want to throw number 7 on, we can talk about basically how to do that. Now,
Yes.
so let's start with the stone here. You're going to read all sorts of different things from different people about get this stone, get that stone. This one's best, that one's better. You know what? If it's abrasive, it's going to work. In fact, in underdeveloped countries, people can't afford to buy stones like this. So they sharpen their machetes on the sidewalk or on a rock, whatever. And if you
Mhm.
know what you're doing, you actually can use a rock or a sidewalk to sharpen your knife. Sure, they're better stones. This one happens to be a diamond stone. Is it worthwhile spending $40 or $50 for a really nice diamond stone? I don't know. If you've got the money, go for it. If you don't have the money, you'll do just as good a job with a conventional stone that just costs a few bucks. Now, if you throw this thing back on again, that same slide back on again, okay, let's look at how you do this. First of all, there's a penny in the back there. I call this the penny angle. Now, yeah, most people don't get the angle right on their knives. They keep changing angles all the time, which is why they can never get it sharp. Or they sharpen their knife and then they give it to somebody else to use who maybe tries to sharpen it for them, and the angle they maintain isn't the same as the angle you maintain. So the point is, once you learn to sharpen a knife by hand, you are the one that needs to keep sharpening it. Nobody else can really do that for you freehand. Yeah, they can use a machine, but you're not going to have a machine on a camping trip. Now,
Mhm.
if you have a knife that looks about like this is Swiss Army style knife. It has kind of a very narrow blade. If you put a penny behind the spine of the knife, like you see here, that's about the correct angle. Okay. You really want an angle of, I like about 12 degrees, 10, 12 degrees. They recommend 15 degrees. Some people recommend 20 degrees. The more abrupt your angle, the more rugged stuff you plan to cut. In other words, if you're going to be cutting bone and gristle, you probably want a 15 to 20 degree angle. But if you're going to be slicing tomatoes and spuds spuds or carrots or whatever you're going to use this knife for cooking, you want a fairly shallow angle. I'd say between 10 and 15 degrees. And that penny will put that angle at about 10 degrees. And then you slice into the stone like you see here. Now you got to do that for a while. It's going to take a while with these new modern steels. These new modern steels are very hard, and you're just not going to go swish, 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 and this thing is sharpened. And furthermore, if you buy a new knife, that angle on the blade has been set by machine. You're not going to duplicate that machine angle. You're going to use what your body is telling you to use. So
Mhm.
you're going to have to remove that machine angle and make the angle the one that you're comfortable with. And you know what? The harder the steel, the longer that's going to take. I'm not kidding you. Even with good stones, sometimes you're going to spend 30 or 40 minutes to get it right the first time. So
I was just gonna ask you that. Yep. How long it
yeah,
takes.
but if you're willing to learn and you're willing to take the time, once you get that razor edge on it, maintaining that edge is fast and very simple. You're never going to have to go through that again. That is, unless you lend your knife to somebody. And by the way, I don't do that. If
Yeah.
somebody says, Cliff, can I borrow your knife? I say, what are you going to use it for? well, I'm going to cut that thing. Let me do that for you if it's okay.
Right,
I don't trust anybody with my razor sharp knives because you know what? They don't respect the sharpness. They don't respect what it takes to get a razor edge on a knife. Sorry, didn't mean to go into a big dissertation here.
It's okay. No, that's interesting. And I remember seeing that that method that you used there. And yeah, I've done that. I've done something similar to that. That's a great idea because when you're, well, let's put it this way. Penny doesn't take much to pack, and you have a stone, you take a stone with you. That's ideal. I like that a lot. All right. We're going to take a break, but don't go away. We'll be back with more of the camping show on W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV right after these messages.
It's time to go camping. Introducing Campground Views virtual tours. You can tour the campground, see the sites, see if they are available, and click to book your perfect spot. Hit the open road and explore the amazing places found in nature. We make it easy to discover, find, and book your site so that you can go have the fun and freedom you seek. Campground Views virtual tours make it easy and simple for you to see where you are going.
A few years ago, someone asked Rutabaga's owner, Darren Bush, "Hey, how long have you guys been selling boats?" Darren replied, "We don't sell boats. We sell time on the water." Of course, that comes in all types. We help people paddle more safely with Rutabaga outdoor programs. We rent canoes, kayaks, and stand-up paddleboards. We sell and install racks to get you from home to adventure. Rutabaga's got everything you need to get you out on the water, like paddles, life jackets, dry bags, and clothing. Rutabaga Paddle Sports, on the web at rutabaga.com. Mention you saw this ad on the camping show.
And we're back with our guest, Cliff Jacobson, on the camping show. Hey, just want to give a shout out here. We said hello to Donald Kelly here before, Bushman 613, and Kim Switzer. Thanks for chiming in. You guys are good friends, right?
Yeah, thank you. Hey, didn't you just love that beautiful wood canvas canoe in that last commercial?
Oh, did.
I
know,
I always wanted one of those. Oh, well.
I know. Yeah, I think I'd be very hard on one, and so I wouldn't want to do that because I know me. I crash into things sometimes and run over stuff I shouldn't. Yeah. Okay. So I wanted to ask you, what are some of the most common, and you've mentioned a couple of them, but what are some of the most common mistakes you see people making when it comes to doing maintenance on their equipment? And I should say, maybe doing or not doing. Let's go both ways on that.
Well, I'd say there's two things. One is waiting until it breaks to fix it, and disregarding the old adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Okay, so let's talk about for a minute if it ain't broke, don't fix it, because frankly, I think there's probably more gear ruined by over maintenance than by under maintenance. So let's take some examples. Mm-hmm. Sleeping bags. Now, be aware, every time you wash a sleeping bag, you kill it a little bit. With a down bag, if you've owned a down bag, you know that when it's new, maybe it lofts up this high. Huh. Wash it carefully and measure the loft. Hello, you just lost some. Okay, now you may not lose any more, but you may lose a little bit, but it's never going to be like it was before you messed with it. But right. Eventually, you're going to have to wash your sleeping bag. Yep. Now, with a synthetic bag, every time you wash a synthetic bag, especially if you use a washing machine, which is what most people do, you're running it through that agitator like this. And that stuff's not like down. Down is just loose and flowing around in those tubes and just sort of goes around. But a lot of this stuff is batted in. It's sewn somewhere, somehow to something. And that batting it around, it was going to damage it. And and regardless of even the synthetics that aren't batted in like that, they're just not as resilient as down. In fact, there's an old, it's not an old saying, but the common belief is that a down sleeping bag, the shell will wear out long before the down. I know. I've worn out 2 bags in my lifetime where the down is just fine, but the shell has now deteriorated to the point where I can just literally, if I get in the bag too fast, just tears. There's nothing left of the fabric.
Right.
Synthetic bags, basically, the unscientific rule is if it's a well-used bag, if you use it every year, you're probably going to get about 7 years out of a well-used synthetic bag. You're going to get a lifetime out of a down bag. That is until the shell goes.
Yeah.
But it's probably going to take a minimum of 20 years of hard use for the shell on a down bag to go. That's one of the reasons why I much prefer down bags over synthetic bags. They not only last longer and have a wider temperature comfort range, which means they're warmer when it's cool and cooler when it's warm than synthetic bags, and they stuff smaller and so forth, but they're easier to maintain. So what happens is a lot of people with sleeping bags, they come home after a trip, they feel like, I got to wash the bag. I slept in it for a week or 2 weeks. No, you don't. You don't have to wash it. What you do want to do is set this baby out in the sun for a couple of hours, leave it open, let it get all good and dried out. If you want to sponge off the shell, get rid of the grunge, especially around where your head is touching it, fine, go ahead and do that. But don't think you got to wash this thing every trip. Now, by comparison, I tend to use my sleeping bags a lot, but I wash my down bag on average, I would say every 4 or 5 years. Okay. The rest of the time, I just sponge off the shell, stick it in the sun, and let it go. And frankly, I think if you're smart, that's what you're going to do with your sleeping bags, because every time you wash them, you kill them a little bit. And now the same thing is true, of course, with down jackets and synthetic jackets. If you can get away with pretty much sponging off the shell, you're better off, though eventually you're going to start getting a load up of sweat and debris that goes through the fabric and gets into the substrate, and then you're going to have to wash it. The key thing is be sure you're using the right stuff. Now, example, in the early days of Gore-Tex, they specified powder detergent only. Well, that's old hat now. Now it's liquid detergent only. And they make cases for special down soaps. And I would say to you, those down soaps are worth buying because the beauty of them is they totally rinse clean. And that's the really important thing with down, and even some of the synthetics, is you got to get all the soap out. So you're better off buying a specialized product for doing that. Now, I've had good luck with some over-the-counter stuff. I've used ivory snow. I've used ivory flakes. I use a liquid ivory detergent. They've worked pretty well for me, but I generally wash my sleeping bags in a bathtub at home. Okay. And then after I've washed it in the bathtub at home, what I do, I pick it up in a big net and I take it to a laundromat and I put it in, I think they call it the extractor, just a giant centrifuge.
The extractor. Wow.
Yeah, it spins all the water out. Okay?
Oh, okay.
And then I put it in a dryer, a big commercial dryer. You don't want to use your dryer at home because it's
too big. Yeah.
The bag's too big and you damage it. And then I'll put a couple of tennis balls in there.
Do the same.
And then I put the heat on low. And then what I do this little trick. I roll up a magazine, and when you close the door on the commercial dryer, it hits a button.
Right.
And when it hits the button, what happens is then, or when you open it, the button's in the back there, and it shuts it off. So if you leave the door ajar a little bit and slam a rolled magazine in by the button, between the button and the door,
Right.
it
Just
will
keep
activate. It will activate it, and it will spin. But the door will be open a little bit, and that'll bleed some heat, because that's the big danger. Actually, with a synthetic bag or with a down bag, is that nylon shell. You can't get that nylon too hot, or it's going to melt.
So you've experienced the dryers being a little too hot, even on low, huh?
Yeah, I
Really?
have, and
Okay.
I'm really worried. Like I got one of my down bags is over $300. You know, I don't want to take a chance on damaging it.
Right.
Plus, don't forget, you also have nylon zipper teeth, and they're sensitive, really sensitive to heat too.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Yeah,
I
they
would
get heated
say,
up enough times they get brittle too. Yeah.
I would say that's really the big thing. There are some others too. I think
We got about 5 minutes left, Clip. So just to let you know, we'll wrap. Yep.
I say one of the big no-nos, hopefully you don't see this too much anymore, but don't ever store your sleeping bag in a stuff sack. And if you store your tent in a stuff sack, don't store it with the poles and the stakes. Here's why. When you pull those stakes out of the ground, there's going to be a little dampness there. The poles are going to be a little damp. So if you store the sleeping bag in the tent in the same bag with the poles and the stakes, that moisture is going to get into the tent, and you're going to be one of these people who's going to wind up with peeling coating on the inside. So store your sleeping bags in a cotton bag or a netted bag. Store your tents. Again, it's best in a breathable bag, but it's going to be okay in its normal bag if everything is dry when you store it away. And just store the poles and stakes separately. Okay, so I would say those are the biggies. And kind of in closing this thing out, I know I said to CW, I said, this isn't the most fun, program we've had. I mean, who wants to learn about, maintaining stuff? But I'm glad we did it. And hopefully there's some points that we can all take.
I think so. And I mean, there are a number of people who have even just sent me questions like, hey, what do you do for this? Or what do you recommend? And I tell them what I do. And I'll tell you what, there are a number of things, actually quite a few things, from reading your books. I go, hey, that's better than what I was doing. I like that. I'm going to use that. And so I've stole some things from you, Cliff. I'll admit it. Lots, lots of things. But no, I mean, you're the master. One thing I noticed, and now my basement floor is all epoxy coated. Okay, it's painted. But before that, I had tents. I didn't put my sleeping bags on the floor, but because they're down bags too, and they're like yours, where they're pricey. But I had one tent that was on the basement floor, and there was some moisture that came up through the floor, and it kind of ruined the tent. And it was in its original bag, stuff sack. But it was I make sure everything is dry. It goes on the clothesline, hang it out before, at the end of the season or whatever, or the end of the trip, I should say, but especially at the end of the season. And it stained the tent, and it made the material kind of rotten, where it was actually, it tore. And I don't know if that's something you've ever experienced. Or
storing camping gear on concrete, of course, is never a good idea. You always want to store it on a wood shelf or something like that. But breathability is the key to all this stuff.
Absolutely.
Breathability.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay. Let's do this last question here. Cliff, where can our viewers and listeners go to follow you and purchase your books?
Well, they can go on my website, cliffcanoe.com. And there's, by the way, I might say on cliffcanoe.com, I do a blog every month. The latest one seems to be dear to the hearts of a lot of people. It's the story of the Old Town Tripper canoe, how it was designed, how it was invented, and the amazing, amazing man, Lou Gilman, who designed it, and how he found that sometimes things are not supposed to work, but they do.
But they do.
Anyway, you might enjoy that. And there's a lot of different blogs on there. You can subscribe to them. Doesn't cost you a penny. It's all free.
Well, Cliff,
So-
I have read a number of your blogs, and they are excellent. Every one of them I've read. Yeah, excellent stuff. You are an excellent writer. Well, Cliff, I want to thank you for being my guest here on the Camping Show. It was a pleasure having you here this evening, as always.
Well, it's always a pleasure being with you, CW. And thanks to all who tuned in and for the kind comments many of you posted. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, and that goes for me as well. Well, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Campground Views and Rutabaga Paddle Sports, for bringing you tonight's show. Be sure to tune in for next week's episode, Outfitting in the BWCA 2021 Update, with my special guest, Drew Brockett. Until then, thank you for tuning into the Camping Show. This is CW Getz reminding you, learn more, do more. See you next week.